Chosen one, the fact that you're here right now is no accident. You didn't stumble across this message by chance, and you're not watching this out of boredom or curiosity. Something far greater is unfolding, something sacred and intentional. This moment, right here, is not random. It is a divine appointment that was written into the timeline of your life long before you even knew what your soul was searching for. You have been led here, not by algorithm or coincidence, but by God Himself. And if you've ever sensed that there was something more for you, something unexplainable stirring in your spirit, this is the moment where that quiet knowing begins to make sense. Maybe you've carried that sense your whole life, that you didn't quite belong, that you saw things others didn't, that you felt things more deeply than those around you. You tried to fit in, to walk a path that made others comfortable, but something inside you kept whispering that you were meant for more. And you were right. That whisper wasn't a fantasy. It was a signal. A sacred echo. A call from heaven confirming that you are not just another face in the crowd. You are chosen. You are called. And this, right now, is the time for you to rise. You've been through seasons of silence. You've waded through uncertainty. You've endured rejection, loneliness, and long nights of wondering if your prayers were being heard. But none of it was wasted. Every delay was divine. Every pause was purposeful. While the world may have looked at your life and seen stillness or setback, heaven saw something else: preparation. Because God does not rush what He is refining. And you, chosen one, have been carefully and lovingly refined for such a time as this. Now the season of waiting is over. You can feel the change in the air. Something inside you has shifted, subtly at first, like a whisper on the wind, but now stronger, undeniable. That tug in your spirit, that feeling that something is coming, is not your imagination. It is the move of God. It is the unfolding of a greater purpose, one that has been meticulously prepared for you. You are not stepping into something new by accident. You are stepping into something sacred that has always been yours. And this next step, it's not about striving. It's not about rushing to make things happen. It's about alignment. It's about stepping into your divine calling with full awareness that heaven has already gone before you. This is not a moment to hesitate. It's a moment to trust. To release fear. To say yes. Because what God is preparing for you now is not just a new chapter, it's a new reality. A spiritual elevation. A divine encounter. God is orchestrating an unexpected meeting. Not a meeting with a person or an opportunity, but a meeting with destiny itself. A sacred intersection between the pain you've endured, the faith you've carried, and the purpose you were born to fulfill. This isn't about changing your physical location. This is about transforming your entire way of being. God is drawing you into a place beyond fear, beyond confusion, beyond limitation, into a realm where His presence covers you, guides you, and reveals who you really are. But before you step into that place, you must ask yourself, what is God revealing at this very moment? What is He trying to show you through this divine appointment? Why now? Why you? What is it about this point in your journey that makes it the exact right time for your breakthrough? These questions are not meant to overwhelm you, they are meant to awaken you. Because everything that once seemed unclear is about to be made plain. This is your time. This is your moment. And what lies ahead is not just another phase of life, it is a divine unfolding, one that was written for you before you ever took your first breath. So as we step forward, know this: you are not alone, you are not lost, and you are not late. You are right on time, standing at the threshold of something far greater than you can imagine. The divine meeting is already underway, and it's about to reveal everything. Now the question becomes, what exactly is God revealing through this unexpected meeting? And what will it mean for your destiny? You've walked through storms that others couldn't see. Silent battles no one ever acknowledged. Rejection that pierced deeper than words could express. Doubts that made you question if God had forgotten you. Isolation so thick it felt like the world was moving on without you, while you remained still, trapped between a promise you once believed in and the pain of not seeing it come to pass. But let me tell you something, chosen one, your pain was never punishment. It was preparation. It's tempting to look back at the delays and disappointments and wonder what went wrong. But what if nothing went wrong at all? What if every setback was heaven's setup? What if every unanswered prayer was not a denial, but a divine training session? What if the very silence you've endured was God's way of sharpening your spiritual senses, making you more aware, more anchored, and more ready than ever before? Because here's the truth, God does not waste suffering. Every hardship you've walked through, every closed door, every betrayal, every sleepless night, was not meant to destroy you. It was meant to refine you. Like gold in the fire, you were being purified, not punished. You were being molded into someone who could carry the weight of a higher calling. And that calling doesn't rest on comfort. It rests on character. Think of Joseph. Sold into slavery by his own brothers, imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit, forgotten by those he helped. His life looked like a series of injustices. But behind every painful moment was the hand of God, crafting a leader who would one day save a nation. When Joseph stood in a position of power, he didn't look back in bitterness, he looked back with revelation. What you meant for evil, he told his brothers, God meant for good, Genesis 50 verse 20. What if the betrayals in your life are the very events God is using to position you for breakthrough? Or take Oprah Winfrey. Born into poverty, abused as a child, told she would never succeed. Yet through it all, she clung to her faith and her voice. She turned her wounds into wisdom and became one of the most powerful women in media, not because she avoided pain, but because she allowed pain to shape her into someone stronger, someone more compassionate, someone who could carry a message that would touch millions. Her past didn't define her. It prepared her. Then there's Esther, an orphan, hidden in the shadows of a foreign palace. No title. No protection. Just obedience and timing. When the fate of her people was on the line, she stepped forward and fulfilled a divine assignment no one else could carry. Her preparation was silent. Unseen. But when her moment came, she was ready. And who knows, the scripture says, but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Esther 4 verse 14. What if your quiet seasons are not signs of delay, but confirmations that you are being hidden for the perfect moment to be revealed? And what about Martin Luther King Jr.? He was misunderstood, threatened, attacked, yet he stood firm. His mission wasn't easy. His pain was public. But he knew the cost of purpose, and he refused to turn back. The ultimate measure of a man, he once said, is not where he stands in moments of comfort, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. What if your current trial is building in you the courage required for a mission that will shift not only your life, but the lives of others? See, the pattern is always the same. Pain precedes purpose. The wilderness comes before the promised land. The breaking comes before the blessing. Why? Because strength doesn't come from ease. It comes from endurance. Faith doesn't grow in sunshine. It's forged in storms. An identity, true spiritual identity, is only revealed when everything you once leaned on has been stripped away, and you realize that all you truly have is God. So I'll ask you again, what if your pain is preparation? What if the nights you cried alone were the same nights God was writing a greater story for your life? What if your struggle wasn't a sign of being overlooked, but proof that you were being carefully watched over, even when you didn't feel it? You are not weak because you've suffered. You are strong because you're still standing. You're still here. You didn't quit. You didn't let the darkness swallow you whole. And that matters more than you know. Because those who are chosen are rarely the ones with the easiest path. They are the ones with the deepest wounds and the strongest hearts. They are the ones who have been tested, crushed, refined, and still said yes. So don't be ashamed of your scars. They are not marks of failure. They are symbols of sacred training. Each one tells a story of how you survived. Each one is evidence that you are being shaped for something greater. Many are broken by pain, but the chosen are built by it. And now, as the dust of your trials begins to settle, you stand at a threshold. You are not who you used to be. You've changed. You've grown. You've been equipped for more than you realize. And this isn't the end of the storm, it's the calm before the calling. Something is shifting. Not just around you, but within you. The pain was never meant to define you. It was meant to deliver you into the person you were always meant to become. So take a deep breath. Look back with clarity, not regret. And begin to ask yourself, could it be that everything I've endured was setting the stage for the moment God reveals my true assignment? Because that moment is coming. And when it does, you'll understand that the waiting was not wasted, the silence was not neglect, and the struggle was not for nothing. It was all sacred training. And now, the question that must be asked is this: are you willing to carry the weight of being chosen, even when it costs you more than comfort? Being chosen doesn't mean you were selected for comfort. It doesn't mean your path will be free of pain, rejection, or misunderstanding. In fact, the truth is quite the opposite. Being chosen often means being called to carry more weight, more responsibility, more spiritual warfare, because your life is no longer your own. It belongs to a mission greater than yourself. Many believe that if God has chosen them, things should go smoother. That blessings should flow effortlessly, that the world will finally recognize their worth. But chosen ones quickly realize this is not the case. Being chosen by heaven often means being rejected by the world. You are marked not just for favor, but for fire. You are set apart not just for elevation, but for endurance. Look at Jesus. The ultimate example of what it means to be chosen. He wasn't celebrated, he was despised. He wasn't embraced, he was rejected. And yet, he fulfilled the greatest mission history has ever known. As Isaiah 53 declares, he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, and familiar with pain. He was pierced, crushed, and oppressed, yet he remained silent, like a lamb led to the slaughter, because he knew that his suffering was the cost of our salvation. If the Son of God had to endure rejection and betrayal to fulfill his purpose, what makes us think we will escape the same path? Being chosen isn't a title, it's a burden. It's the awareness that you carry something sacred in a world that doesn't understand sacred things. It's the loneliness of walking into rooms and feeling unseen, not because you are invisible, but because your light is too bright for some to handle. It's the pain of being misunderstood, even by those you love. It's the internal wrestling of knowing you were made for more, but feeling like everything around you contradicts that truth. Consider Moses. Raised as a prince, yet forced into exile. For 40 years, he lived in the wilderness, far from the palace, far from power, far from the life he once knew. To the outside world, he looked like a failure. But to God, he was in training. Every lonely step in the desert, every year spent in obscurity, was preparation for the day he would lead an entire nation out of bondage. The calling came with a cost. He had to give up everything familiar to step into everything divine. Or think of Nelson Mandela. A man of conviction, who spent 27 years in prison for daring to challenge injustice. Nearly 3 decades locked away, but he didn't lose hope. He didn't lose faith. He emerged not bitter, but better, ready to lead a broken nation into healing. His suffering wasn't meaningless. It was the price of leadership, of reconciliation, of real transformation. What if the pain you've endured is shaping you into someone the world desperately needs? Being chosen is not for the faint of heart. It's not for those seeking applause or approval. It's for those willing to be refined like diamonds under pressure. Because just like a diamond forms in the darkest, deepest conditions, under immense heat and pressure, so too are the chosen shaped through adversity. Every trial you've faced hasn't been to break you, but to build you. Every tear you've shed hasn't been wasted, but has watered the soil of your spiritual growth. You see, many are called, but few are willing to pay the price of being chosen. The cost is high. It's the loss of friendships that couldn't handle your elevation. It's the isolation that comes when your convictions no longer align with the crowd. It's the long nights when your obedience feels like silence and your prayers go unanswered. But even in those moments, especially in those moments, God is still with you. Watching. Refining. Shaping. He hasn't forgotten you. He's preparing you. So let me ask you a question. Are you willing to stand firm even when others doubt you? Are you willing to keep walking, even when the path is unclear and the pain is heavy? Are you willing to trust that your calling is greater than your comfort? Because here's the truth that every chosen one must face: you may not always be understood, but you are always seen by God. You may be overlooked by man, but you are handpicked by heaven. And what you're carrying is not light, it's holy. It's weighty. It's divine. But it's also necessary. This is the cost of being chosen, not just to survive hardship, but to thrive in the midst of it. To find peace not in the absence of trouble, but in the presence of purpose. To recognize that the very things designed to crush you are the tools God uses to crown you. Don't let the pressure fool you. Don't let the pain silence you. Every chosen one walks through a fire that others can't handle. Not because you're cursed, but because you're called. And heaven is counting on your endurance. So if you've been feeling the weight of this calling, if you've been walking through seasons that make no sense, if you've been asking God, why is this so hard? You're not alone. You're simply in the refining room. And when it's over, you won't come out empty. You'll come out anointed. Let this be your reminder: diamonds don't form in easy places. Leaders don't emerge from comfort zones. Glory doesn't rest on the untested. The cost is great, but the reward is eternal. And now, the question remains: will you answer the call, even when the weight is heavy? There comes a moment in every chosen one's life when the ground beneath their feet no longer feels like home. The places that once comforted you now feel foreign. The conversations that once excited you now seem empty. The people you once called your circle now seem unable to understand the depths you're being called into. And in that quiet ache of restlessness, you hear it, heaven's whisper: it's time to leave. Not everyone is called to leave in the same way. But every chosen one must walk away from something. It may be a place, a mindset, a habit, or a relationship. But make no mistake, if you've been set apart by God, then you will be called to separate from the world. Not in arrogance or isolation, but in obedience. Because you cannot hold on to the temporary and still step into the eternal. You cannot cling to the comfort of the familiar and expect to carry the fullness of your divine assignment. Think about Abraham. God's words to him weren't gentle suggestions, they were commands that disrupted everything he knew: leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. He had no map. No guarantees. Just a promise. He left his homeland, his safety net, and his history behind because he trusted the voice that called him. That's what faith looks like. Not knowing exactly where you're going, but believing that the one who called you has already gone ahead. Or look at Moses. Born into privilege, raised in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by power and luxury, and yet, he left it all. He chose the wilderness over the throne. He walked away from worldly prestige to answer a divine call. And for 40 long years, he wandered. Not because he was lost, but because he was being found, by God, by purpose, by destiny. What he let go of could never compare to what he was stepping into. Leaving the world isn't about physical relocation, it's about spiritual separation. It's about cutting the emotional cords that tie you to the systems, patterns, and approvals of this world. It's choosing to walk by the Spirit when everyone else is running after status. It's letting go of shallow waters so you can swim in the depths of purpose. You weren't made to sit on the shore. You were called to dive deep. It's not easy. Leaving always hurts. Saying goodbye to what's comfortable always comes with grief. There will be moments you'll wonder if you made the right choice. Nights when you'll feel the sting of loneliness. Days when the world looks tempting and your calling feels heavy. But in those moments, remember this: the world may not see you, but heaven knows your name. God hasn't just called you out, He has called you higher. And every step away from the world is a step closer to the life He designed specifically for you. This is not abandonment. This is alignment. You're not running from life, you're running toward purpose. You're not losing your identity, you're finally discovering it. Because who you truly are cannot be found in the world's mirror. It can only be revealed in the reflection of God's eyes. The deeper you go in Him, the clearer you'll see yourself. And perhaps that's what this season is really about. A holy untangling. A sacred unrooting. God is shaking loose every attachment that no longer serves the future He has prepared for you. He is calling you to let go of temporary security so He can give you eternal stability. That's why the job didn't work out. That's why the relationship fell apart. That's why the doors closed and the plans collapsed, because He is redirecting your steps toward a kingdom path. Don't resist the separation. Don't fear the release. What you leave behind cannot compare to what is waiting ahead. Just like a ship must cut loose from the dock to sail into the open sea, you must release what's safe to embrace what is sacred. You were never meant to stay anchored in comfort. You were designed to move with the wind of the Spirit. And if you've been feeling like you don't belong here, if you've been sensing a divine disconnection, if your spirit has been aching for more, this is your confirmation. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are being called. You are being chosen. You are being moved. But here's the question you must ask yourself now: are you willing to leave what is good to receive what is divine? Are you ready to step away from the applause of men to hear the whisper of heaven? What are you still holding on to that's keeping you from walking fully in your calling? Maybe it's an identity rooted in what others think. Maybe it's a habit that feels safe but no longer aligns with who you're becoming. Maybe it's a fear that keeps you circling the same old patterns. Whatever it is, release it. Trust that what God has in store is worth every ounce of discomfort you'll face in the transition. You were not chosen to blend in. You were chosen to be set apart. And yes, separation feels like loss at first. But soon, you'll realize, it's freedom. It's clarity. It's spiritual maturity. And it's preparation for the next dimension of your purpose. So now that you've heard the call, now that your spirit has been stirred, the only question left is, will you answer it? Have you ever felt like heaven went silent just when you needed God the most? Like your prayers disappeared into thin air and your cries returned only as echoes? If you've walked through a season like that, you're not alone, and more importantly, you're not forgotten. What if I told you that silence wasn't punishment, but preparation? That the pain you've endured was not random suffering, but a sacred test designed to shape the very core of who you are becoming? Life, for the chosen ones, is never a string of coincidences. It is a sequence of divine tests. Not to destroy you, but to refine you. Like fire to gold, trials are heaven's tools for purification. And this test, the spiritual one, isn't about how loudly you can praise when things are going well. It's about whether you can still believe when everything goes quiet. It's about whether you can trust when the plan no longer makes sense. It's about whether your faith remains when your feelings have fled. Think of Job, a man who lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health. From the outside, it seemed like God had turned against him. His friends accused him. His wife urged him to curse God. But Job, standing in the ashes of all he once had, declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." That is faith on fire. That is what spiritual testing reveals. Not how strong we are when everything is perfect, but how anchored we remain when everything breaks. Or take Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery, scarred by cruelty, hunted like prey. She escaped, and then returned, again and again, to lead others to freedom. She moved through darkness with nothing but her courage and her God. She once said, "I always told God, I'm going to hold steady on you, and you've got to see me through." Imagine that kind of trust, believing without maps, moving without clarity, risking without reward. And then there's Joan of Arc, a teenage girl who heard the voice of God, obeyed, and led armies. She was mocked, condemned as a heretic, and burned alive. But she never renounced her calling. Even as flames licked at her skin, she clung to the truth God had spoken. That's the cost of spiritual obedience. That's the weight of being chosen. But no test is greater than the one Jesus endured. Betrayed by Judas, denied by Peter, abandoned by the crowds he came to save. As he hung on the cross, even the Father's presence seemed to vanish. My God, why have you forsaken me? And yet, he stayed. He didn't run. He didn't call down angels. He fulfilled the mission. Even in agony, he chose obedience. He chose love. So here's the question that slices deep: can you remain faithful even when you feel abandoned? Not when the blessings are flowing. Not when the doors are opening. But when nothing makes sense. When your tears fall unanswered. When the heavens are silent. When it feels like everyone has walked away. That's where the test lives. Not in the shout, but in the stillness. Not in the reward, but in the waiting. Faith, in its purest form, doesn't need proof. It doesn't demand reassurance. True faith is forged in hidden places, in caves, in deserts, in prisons, in silent nights. It's what lives inside you when every outside thing has fallen apart. It's the root system beneath the surface, holding firm when the winds of life try to rip you apart. And for the chosen ones, this kind of faith is not optional. It is essential. Let's not romanticize it. The spiritual test is painful. It is lonely. It is confusing. You'll ask questions heaven won't answer right away. You'll face days that feel endless, nights that feel unbearable. But underneath it all, something holy is happening. God is building you in the silence. Training you in the shadows. Strengthening you for a future you cannot yet see. Just like a seed buried in the soil, it looks dead from the outside, but inside, something is breaking open. The darkness is not your grave. It is your womb. It is not your end. It is your beginning. And when the time is right, what's been hidden will rise. What's been tested will shine. What's been refined will lead. So if you're in that place right now, where the fire is hot, the silence is deafening, and the path is unclear, know this: you are not being punished. You are being purified. You are not being crushed. You are being shaped. This is not abandonment. It is alignment. God is preparing you for what He's already prepared for you. And maybe, just maybe, this test is the final one before your next breakthrough. Maybe this silence is the last pause before the symphony begins. Maybe this confusion is the doorway into deeper revelation. The question is, will you pass the test not by doing something big, but by staying still and trusting? So let me ask again, and let it echo in your spirit: can you remain faithful even when you feel abandoned? Because that's when it matters most. Now take a breath, and prepare your heart. Because the next part of your journey requires something even deeper: surrender. Not just surviving the test, but yielding to the one who wrote it. The fire has refined you. Now comes the call to rise. Will you trust God when it makes no sense? There comes a point in every chosen one's journey when strength alone is no longer enough. When persistence, discipline, and faith all meet a wall that cannot be climbed by effort but must be passed through by surrender. It's the moment when you realize that holding tighter is no longer helping you move forward, and the only way through is to release your grip. But surrender, in the kingdom of God, is not weakness. It is the most powerful form of obedience. It is not a retreat, it is a declaration that God's way is better than yours. And in that moment of release, something sacred begins to unfold. True surrender is not the giving up of hope, it is the giving up of control. It's the sacred act of unclenching your fists so your hands are finally free to receive. How often do we pray for miracles while holding tight to our own plans? How many times do we beg God to move, while refusing to let go of the very thing He's asking us to lay down? What if the thing you're trying so hard to control is the very thing God is asking you to release? Abraham understood this test better than anyone. Imagine being asked to give up the very promise God gave you. Isaac wasn't just Abraham's son, he was the fulfillment of a divine word. And yet, in one of the most powerful moments of surrender in Scripture, Abraham climbed the mountain, built the altar, and laid his son down, not because he understood, but because he trusted. He didn't debate with God. He didn't demand an explanation. He obeyed. And just as he raised the knife, heaven intervened, not to take from him, but to bless him more than he could imagine. God didn't want Isaac's life. He wanted Abraham's heart. That's the power of surrender. We see this principle echoed in the life of Oprah Winfrey. She desperately wanted a role in The Color Purple, a dream so close to her heart that it consumed her. But when every door seemed closed, she finally let go. She told God, "If it's meant for me, let it be. If not, I surrender." And soon after, the call came. Without audition. Without striving. The role found her when she stopped chasing it. When she released control, God delivered what was always meant for her. Sometimes, the blessing isn't blocked, it's waiting on your surrender. And then there's the story of C.S. Lewis. Once a committed atheist, he resisted faith with every fiber of his being. He feared losing his autonomy, his logic, his identity. But slowly, the walls he built around his heart began to crack. And when he finally surrendered, he called it the most reluctant yet most joyful conversion. What he feared would break him ended up completing him. Through that surrender, Lewis found not a cage, but a calling. He didn't lose himself, he discovered who he truly was. There's a truth that whispers through all these stories: what you refuse to surrender will always control you. And what you finally release is often the gateway to your greatest breakthrough. But surrender doesn't feel easy. It feels like loss. It feels like giving up power. Like laying down your sword in the middle of a battlefield. But what if that surrender is the very act that brings heaven to fight on your behalf? Think of it this way: a clenched fist cannot receive a gift. As long as you're gripping your own will, your own timeline, your own version of the future, you cannot receive what God has prepared. But the moment your hands open, your soul opens too. That's when the impossible becomes possible. That's when the supernatural finds room to move. Imagine a butterfly still fighting to stay in the cocoon. Refusing to break free because it's afraid of the unknown. But it's only when the cocoon is released that it can soar. Surrender is that sacred break, the moment when your old self is shed so your divine self can emerge. It is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your transformation. And that's the emotional rhythm of this sacred act. At first, surrender feels like tension, like inner conflict. Your mind says hold on, your spirit says let go. You wrestle with uncertainty, with fear of losing something precious. But then comes the release. And with it, peace. Freedom. A weight you didn't know you were carrying finally lifted. And you realize that God wasn't waiting for your perfection. He was waiting for your permission. Could your greatest breakthrough be waiting on the other side of surrender? Could it be that what you've been praying for is not being delayed, but is waiting for you to let go of the lesser thing, so God can give you the greater? That's the invitation before you now. Not to strive, but to yield. Not to demand, but to trust. Some of us have spent years trying to carry things God never asked us to hold. Relationships that no longer serve His purpose. Dreams He's replaced with greater ones. Fears He's already conquered. But we hold on out of habit, out of fear, out of pride. And heaven waits, not to punish, but to pour out blessings. If only we'd open our hands. So today, ask yourself this: what am I still trying to control that God is asking me to surrender? What door am I trying to force open when God has already prepared another? What identity am I clinging to, when He's trying to reveal who I really am? Because now comes the most sacred turning point of all. You've endured the test. You've walked through the pain. You've felt the silence. And now, in this holy moment, God asks for one more thing, not your strength, but your surrender. Now that you've surrendered, are you ready to be transformed? What if everything you've endured, every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every wound carved deep into your soul, was leading to one sacred moment? A moment so holy, so intimate, that the heavens themselves would part to receive you? This is not the end. It is the fulfillment of everything you were meant to be. For the chosen ones, life doesn't conclude in darkness. It culminates in light. The ultimate meeting is not about death, it's about reunion. Not a finish line, but a homecoming. A return to the Father who's been waiting at the gate all along. Stephen, one of the early martyrs in the book of Acts, understood this reality better than most. As stones were hurled at him, and pain crushed his body, he looked up, and saw heaven open. There, standing at the right hand of God, was Jesus. Not sitting in judgment, but standing in welcome. As the crowd jeered, heaven stood still. It was as if God paused eternity to greet one who had remained faithful. In that brutal moment of earthly death, Stephen was not abandoned. He was being ushered home. What if every scar you carry is preparing you for that kind of divine encounter? There is something sacred about remaining faithful in silence. We often think that the presence of God should feel dramatic, clouds parting, angels singing, breakthroughs falling like rain. But for many of the most faithful, God's greatest work was done not in the noise, but in the stillness. Mother Teresa knew that silence well. After an early life-changing encounter with God, she spent decades serving in the slums of Calcutta, caring for the sick, the dying, the unwanted. And yet, she confessed that for years, she felt nothing. No confirmation. No divine voice. Just a long, quiet ache. She called it the dark night of the soul. But she kept going. She loved without feeling love. She served without applause. And she believed without evidence. That is the kind of faith that shakes heaven. Harriet Tubman, too, walked in the dark. Escaping slavery was only the beginning of her mission. She went back, again and again, into enemy territory to rescue others. With nothing but a small lantern and an unshakable belief that God was guiding her, she led over 300 people to freedom. She didn't know where every path led. She couldn't guarantee safety. But she trusted the whispers of God in her spirit more than the shouting of danger around her. "I'm going to hold steady on you, and you've got to see me through," she declared. And he did. Not because she had clarity, but because she had courage. What connects these stories is not a lack of suffering, but a consistency of faith. And at the end of that faithfulness comes something indescribable. A moment when all the pain, all the loneliness, all the tears are eclipsed by the radiance of divine love. Scripture tells us that when the faithful reach the end of their race, the Lord speaks a single phrase that makes every struggle worth it: "Well done, my good and faithful servant," Matthew 25 verse 23. Can you imagine hearing those words spoken over your life? Not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. Not because you never fell, but because you kept getting up. Not because the road was smooth, but because you never turned back. In that moment, the ultimate meeting, the soul recognizes its true home. The burdens of earth fade. The ache in your body lifts. And what remains is peace so deep it silences every fear. Heaven is not just a place. It is the fulfillment of every longing. It is the embrace of the one who saw you when no one else did. Who counted every tear. Who carried you when you couldn't walk. And now, he stands, arms wide open, whispering, "Welcome home." This is the promise for the chosen. That no act of obedience is ever forgotten. That no sacrifice goes unnoticed. That every lonely road, every silent prayer, every act of hidden love is recorded in heaven's book. You were never alone. Even when heaven felt silent, it was preparing a place for you. Even when you thought your cries echoed unanswered, angels were being dispatched. Even when the world could not see your worth, heaven was writing your name. And now, this final encounter awaits, not with fear, but with glory. The ultimate meeting is not something to dread. It is the moment every step of faith was building toward. Like the prodigal son returning from a long journey, you are not met with punishment but with celebration. You are not scolded but embraced. The robe, the ring, the feast, it was all being prepared while you were still walking through the valley. That's why your suffering matters. That's why it cannot be dismissed or minimized. Because it is not a detour, it is the path. The chosen are not those who never hurt. They are the ones who never stopped hoping. And their reward is not just peace, but presence. Not just an end, but a beginning beyond imagination. So I ask you, what if your suffering has not been punishment, but preparation for your greatest divine encounter? What if the very pain you begged God to take away, was the very thing carving your soul into a vessel heaven could receive? What if the silence you feared was not His absence, but His invitation? Let this truth settle into your heart, the ultimate meeting is coming. And when it does, all that is broken will be made whole. All that was lost will be restored. All that was hidden will be revealed. You will no longer wonder if your life mattered, because heaven will declare it did. You will no longer doubt if you were seen, because God Himself will say your name. This is not the end. This is the moment you were made for. The moment heaven opens. The moment God stands. The moment the pain finally makes sense. And so I leave you with this question, not as a challenge, but as a sacred invitation: will you remain faithful, even when heaven is silent? Will you trust that, in the end, the ultimate meeting will be worth every tear? Because when that day comes, it won't be goodbye. It will be the most beautiful, welcome home you've ever heard. There comes a time in every chosen one's journey when the old garment of your life no longer fits your soul. You feel it tightening, pulling, suffocating even, because your spirit is outgrowing the limitations of what once was. And in that sacred tension between what's fading and what's forming, God whispers, you are not being led into an ending, but into a beginning. The final transformation is not just a change, it is a spiritual rebirth. It is the moment when everything you've endured begins to make sense. The trials, the silence, the separation, the surrender, they were never random. They were never wasted. They were tools. Tools used by the hands of a holy God to prepare you for something so divine that the world cannot contain it. Deep inside, you've known for a long time, you don't belong here. You've walked through life feeling like a visitor in your own world, like your soul was designed for a higher frequency. Earthly achievements didn't move you. Worldly validation never satisfied. While others chased after status, money, or applause, your heart longed for something more, something eternal. And that ache, that holy restlessness, it was never a flaw. It was the compass of your calling. Have you ever felt like your spirit was reaching for something higher, even when your feet were still planted in familiar places? That feeling was never random. It was the voice of heaven, pulling you away from what was temporary so that you could walk fully into what is eternal. And now, the final transformation is here. It begins with a divine summons. Not an audible voice, but an undeniable pull from deep within your being. You no longer want to run. You're not afraid anymore. There is a quiet boldness rising in your chest. You're ready to say yes, not just to the call, but to everything the call will cost. And so, God begins to cleanse you. Not just on the outside, but in the most hidden places of your soul. He burns away the fear that kept you silent. He exposes the pride that held you back. He dissolves the bitterness you carried for too long. Zechariah 13 verse 9 says, I will refine them like silver and test them like gold. This is what's happening now. You are not being punished. You are being purified. Every delay was preparation. Every heartbreak was sacred fire. Every night you cried and thought God wasn't listening, He was actually reshaping the vessel of your heart so it could carry the glory of what's next. And just when you think you have nothing left, something breaks open inside of you. Like a seed buried in darkness for too long, something sacred begins to push through. You realize this isn't the end of who you are, it's the beginning of who you've always been. The old has lost its grip. The new is rising. Imagine a caterpillar sealed inside its cocoon. It doesn't know what's happening. All it knows is that everything familiar is dissolving. But in the breaking down, a transformation begins. One day, the cocoon tears open, not because the caterpillar was strong, but because it was ready. And from that place of stillness, struggle, and surrender, a butterfly emerges. Beautiful. Changed. Unrecognizable from its former self. And just like that butterfly, you cannot return to who you were. The thoughts that used to guide you no longer apply. The environments you once tolerated now feel suffocating. The conversations you used to enjoy now drain you. That's not a sign something's wrong, it's proof something holy is happening. You are no longer just a person trying to survive, you are a vessel being prepared to carry light. This isn't just about letting go of an old habit or stepping into a new opportunity. This is about shedding your entire old identity to step into the divine design of who God created you to be. There will be fear. That's normal. The soul trembles before it transforms. But fear is not your master anymore. Beneath the trembling is a fire, a hunger, a holy desire that says, I can't stay here. I must become. That's the power of this moment. You're not just leaving something behind, you're stepping into the highest version of yourself, healed, whole, holy, and ready. This is the moment of sacred release. You begin to let go, not because it's easy, but because you trust God's hands more than you trust your own. You begin to loosen your grip on comfort zones, familiar names, even outdated versions of yourself. Because now, your soul is crying out for something deeper. Something real. Something only heaven can give. So I ask you, could it be that your deepest pain was the final tool God used to shape your soul? Could it be that your long nights and broken seasons were actually the proving ground of your transformation? Could it be that every door that closed was never rejection, but redirection into this exact moment? Because now, you stand on sacred ground. And heaven is asking, will you let go of the old, so God can clothe you in the new? This transformation is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of the truest chapter. A chapter where you don't walk in fear, but in spiritual fire. Where your steps are no longer reactive, but divinely ordered. Where your identity is not defined by your past, but by your purpose. You are being called out, to be called up. And once you rise, you will never shrink again. Let this truth settle deep into your bones, you were never meant to stay in the cocoon. You were always meant to fly. And now, the sky is open. Heaven is waiting. The transformation has begun. Are you ready to step into your divine rebirth? Because the next part of your journey is not about surviving. It's about shining. Who were you before the world told you who to be? Before the trauma. Before the shame. Before the silence. Before the expectations, labels, and lies were laid over your spirit like heavy blankets. Who were you before you forgot? The journey to your true self isn't about learning something new, it's about remembering something eternal. You are not here to become someone else. You are here to return to the one God always knew you were. The world may have buried your identity under disappointment, abuse, or rejection, but heaven never lost sight of your name. And the truth is, you were never broken beyond repair. You were buried. Buried under layers of pain, fear, pressure, and performance. But now, the Spirit is calling you back. Not to who you pretended to be. Not to who others needed you to be. But to who you already are in the eyes of God. Look at Moses. A fugitive. A man with blood on his hands and shame in his heart. When God appeared to him in the burning bush, Moses said, "Who am I, that I should go?" Exodus 3 verse 11. But God didn't answer his question with a resume. God answered with a mission, "I will be with you." Because God never defines you by what you've done, but by what you're called to do. Moses thought his past disqualified him, but it was precisely his brokenness that made him the perfect vessel for deliverance. What if the very things you're ashamed of are what God wants to use? Malcolm X walked through prison doors wearing the chains of violence and addiction. Society said he was a criminal. But God saw a voice. A force. A mind sharpened through fire. Malcolm X's transformation wasn't about erasing his past, it was about redeeming it. He didn't run from where he came from. He used it to rise. Maya Angelou once lived in silence. After experiencing abuse as a child, she stopped speaking for years. But that silence wasn't the end. It was the cocoon. From it emerged one of the most powerful voices of a generation. She said, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty." What about you? You've been told you were too sensitive. Too different. Too broken. Too much. Or maybe not enough. Not smart enough. Not strong enough. Not holy enough. And those labels stuck. They wrapped themselves around your spirit like a second skin until you forgot that they were lies. But you were never meant to live under those names. You were made in the image of God. The divine fingerprint is on your soul. The real you is not who the world sees, it's who heaven has always known. And to uncover that true self, you don't need to add more. You don't need more achievements. More validation. More hustle. You need to let go. You need to peel away the layers that don't belong to you. The fear. The people-pleasing. The performance. The pain. Your divine identity is not something to achieve, it's something to uncover. Like a diamond buried in rock, your brilliance was never lost. It was hidden. And now God is breaking through the layers, not to destroy you, but to reveal the glory that's been there all along. So let me ask you, what if your weakness is your greatest tool in God's hands? The world says hide your flaws. Bury your pain. Disguise your doubts. But God says, give them to me. Because the very scar you try to hide may be the doorway to someone else's healing. The very failure that haunts you may be the testimony that sets someone free. Your greatest pain can become your greatest platform, if you stop running from it and start surrendering it. And when that surrender happens, something sacred shifts. You stop striving. You stop proving. You stop performing. You start being. You begin to see yourself not through the eyes of the world, but through the eyes of your Creator. And what do you see? You see a soul wrapped in grace. A spirit formed in fire. A heart that still beats with holy purpose. You see the child of God who was never forgotten, never discarded, never too far gone. You are not who the world said you are. You are who heaven has always known you to be. And when you rise in that truth, everything changes. You no longer walk like a victim of your story, you walk like a vessel of glory. You speak differently. Think differently. Love differently. Not because you're trying to be better, but because you're finally being real. No more masks. No more shame. No more hiding. This is the moment you stop fighting who you are, and start embracing who you've always been. This is the unveiling of your true self. It is raw. It is radiant. It is holy. And it is exactly what the world needs. Because when the world sees someone brave enough to walk in their God-given identity, it gives others permission to do the same. So I ask you, are you ready to remove the labels? Are you ready to stop shrinking into roles you were never meant to play? Are you ready to step into the fullness of your divine design? Because once you embrace your true self, once you stop striving and start living, you don't just find freedom. You become freedom. And that freedom flows from you, healing others, restoring hearts, and igniting purpose. This is more than self-discovery. This is divine remembrance. You are not lost. You are coming home, to yourself. And in doing so, you'll discover that your true identity isn't just about who you are, but about whose you are. Let the healing begin. Let the uncovering begin. Let the light shine. In a world that is increasingly noisy with opinions, divided by ideologies, and wounded by judgment, what truly makes a chosen one stand out is not a sharp tongue or superior intellect, but a heart overflowing with compassion. The world doesn't need more voices trying to be right, it needs more hearts willing to understand. The chosen are not sent to conquer the world through force but to heal it through divine love. True compassion is not weakness. It's the highest expression of spiritual strength, a force that dismantles walls, softens hearts, and brings light where shadows have reigned for too long. Jesus, the embodiment of perfect compassion, didn't just teach truth, he lived it. He touched the untouchable, wept with the broken, forgave the betrayer, and stood in the gap for the condemned. He didn't wait for people to prove they were worthy of love, he saw their pain and responded with presence. The same presence that brought healing to the leper, comfort to the grieving Mary, and restoration to Peter after betrayal. His life whispers the truth, compassion sees pain and moves toward it, not away. That is the heartbeat of a chosen one. Another living example is Mother Teresa, who walked among the dying, the sick, and the forgotten. She didn't ask if someone deserved kindness, she gave it freely because she saw every person as an image-bearer of God. Her famous words ring with eternal truth, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. She didn't heal with sermons or platforms. She healed with presence. She became the hands and feet of Jesus to those the world had forgotten. That is not softness, it is supernatural courage. True compassion is never passive. It is not a fleeting emotion or sympathetic thought. It is spiritual action. When you carry divine compassion, your very presence becomes a medicine for broken souls. Sometimes, just being with someone in their pain, without fixing it or explaining it away, is enough to bring light into the darkness. And here's the miracle, when you offer that light to others, you find it also begins to illuminate your own wounds. The most powerful love often flows through those who have bled the most. The chosen ones often carry deep scars, wounds from betrayal, rejection, loneliness, and failure. But those wounds become the wells from which compassion flows. It is precisely because you've been broken that your heart understands how to tend to others in their brokenness. A heart that has bled does not mean it's broken beyond repair. It means it has been made tender enough for God to use. As strange as it may seem, when you give love, you often receive the very healing you thought you lacked. So, what if the love you give away is the very light that breaks your own chains? What if, in offering compassion to someone else, you find God mending the places in your soul you thought would never heal? Many think they have to be fully restored before they can offer healing to others. But God often calls the wounded to be healers, because the cracks in your heart are the very spaces where His light can shine through. It's not in your perfection that His power flows, it's in your willingness to show up, even when you still feel broken. This is the spiritual paradox: the more you give, the more whole you become. The more you choose love over fear, empathy over indifference, presence over judgment, the more you step into your divine purpose. Compassion isn't just a trait to admire, it is a calling to embody. It is your weapon in a world of war, your mission in a world of confusion, and your proof that the Spirit of God dwells within you. As a chosen one, you have not been sent here to condemn or compete. You have been sent to care, to comfort, to carry others when they can't walk on their own. And in doing so, you discover that compassion is not what you do when you're strong, it's what makes you strong. It deepens your soul, sharpens your purpose, and connects you to the very heart of God. The world may dismiss soft hearts as fragile, but in the kingdom of heaven, they are the fiercest warriors of all. So let your love be fierce. Let your compassion be loud. Let your empathy be active. Because the world will not be healed by those who shout the loudest, but by those who love the deepest. You were chosen for more than survival. You were chosen for healing. You were chosen for light. You were chosen for love. And those who love deeply, endure powerfully. Have you ever looked at your life and wondered, why has my journey been one of relentless trials? If you've ever felt like every step forward was met with resistance, if every breakthrough came after long seasons of silence, pain, or confusion, let this truth settle in your soul: it was never random. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. For the chosen ones, resilience is not a suggestion, it's a spiritual necessity. The fire you've walked through wasn't meant to burn you, it was meant to refine you. In God's design, your endurance is not just survival. It is the proof that you were made for something holy. Consider the story of Job. A man of integrity, faith, and righteousness, yet stripped of everything: his wealth, his health, his family. And still, with trembling lips, he declared, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." Job 13 verse 15. Job's endurance wasn't pretty. It was raw, confused, human. But it was faithful. And in the end, his restoration wasn't small, it was double what he had before. His resilience became the bridge between suffering and divine restoration. That same bridge is being built under your feet. You are not enduring for nothing. You are enduring because heaven has already stamped you as worthy of restoration. Then there's Nelson Mandela. 27 years behind bars, stripped of freedom, reputation, and rights. And yet, he emerged from that prison not bitter, not hardened, but transformed. Not just a survivor, but a leader whose grace would redefine a nation. His story tells us something critical: endurance does not turn you into a victim. When anchored in hope and forgiveness, it turns you into a vessel of reconciliation. What tried to break you may just be preparing you to lead, to love, and to liberate others. And what about Helen Keller, born blind and deaf, a life marked by what the world might call limitation? But through fierce perseverance and divine support, she became a writer, a speaker, a light to millions. Her resilience didn't come from physical strength but from a spirit that refused to be silenced. The very thing that was supposed to cage her voice became the platform from which she roared truth into the world. Maybe your limitation is not the end of your calling, it's the beginning of your ministry. Resilience doesn't always show up in historic figures. Sometimes, it's in the quiet, unseen years. Consider Denzel Washington and Tyler Perry. Both men faced years of rejection, setbacks, and silence. Denzel, early in his career, was told no more times than he could count. But his mother once told him, "You can't buy your way into heaven, let God write your story." And so he waited, not idly, but faithfully. Tyler Perry slept in his car, rejected by investors and ridiculed for his vision. Yet he kept writing, praying, trusting, until the breakthrough came exactly when God ordained. Their stories remind us, delay is not denial. It is divine preparation. The kind of resilience God is building in you is not the kind that simply helps you get through the day. It is the kind that roots you deep, like a tree planted by rivers of living water. When the storm comes, it doesn't sway you. Why? Because the strength is not in what's visible, it's in what's growing beneath. That's what resilience really is. Not the absence of pain, but the quiet decision to keep showing up, to keep believing, to keep standing when everything inside says sit down. It's what happens when your faith no longer depends on how you feel, but on who you believe. Spiritual endurance means staying in the fire without losing your praise. It means trusting that every tear has been counted, every trial has been measured, and every season of waiting is laced with purpose. God doesn't waste suffering. He uses it. And in His hands, what felt like a detour becomes the very road to destiny. Maybe your pain is not punishment, it's preparation for purpose. Maybe your long nights and lonely prayers were not unheard, they were heard, stored, and answered in ways you can't yet see. Let this image live in your soul: resilience is not a wall you build to block pain. It is a bridge God lays down so you can walk through the pain into purpose. Every wound you've endured, every delay you've faced, every rejection you've suffered, they've all become bricks in the foundation of something eternal. Your endurance is not just a story of making it through. It's the evidence that God's hand is on your life, molding you, shaping you, and qualifying you for more than comfort, for calling. And when the time is right, when the season shifts, when heaven says, now, all those years of pressing, of staying faithful, of not giving up when you had every reason to, will make sense. Because then, your resilience will speak louder than any sermon. It will shout to the world, this person didn't just survive, they were transformed. And it wasn't by their own strength. It was the hand of God that carried them through. So hear this today, resilience is not survival, it is divine transformation. Let that be your anthem in the dark. Let that be your fire when your soul grows weary. You are not wasting time. You are not forgotten. You are not weak. You are being forged. You are becoming. Every hardship has been heaven's classroom. Every delay has been heaven's clock. Every scar has been heaven's anointing oil. And now the question is, what if your pain wasn't punishment, but preparation for purpose? Is prayer your afterthought, or your lifeline? This isn't just a poetic question, it's a piercing one. Because for the chosen ones, prayer is not a spiritual option. It's spiritual oxygen. It's not something we run to when everything else fails, it's where we begin. It's not the background music of a religious life, it is the lifeblood of a divine one. In a world that celebrates noise, action, and immediate results, prayer feels invisible, quiet, slow, and hidden. But in heaven's economy, it is the most powerful thing you can ever do. The battlefield of the chosen one begins not with weapons in hand, but with knees to the ground. When Hannah wept in the temple, her lips moved, but no sound came out. So raw, so honest, that even the priest thought she was drunk. But her soul was crying out in a language only heaven could understand. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was releasing her anguish directly into the throne room of God. And what did the Lord do? He answered with life. From her desperate prayer came Samuel, a prophet, a voice, a vessel of God's purpose. This is the divine mystery of prayer, it is not eloquence that moves God, but brokenness. Not performance, but presence. When your heart can't take it anymore and you fall before the Lord, He listens. And then there's Jesus, our perfect example. On the eve of His crucifixion, drenched in sorrow and sweating drops of blood, He didn't run or resist. He prayed. Not my will, but yours be done, He whispered in Gethsemane. At His most vulnerable, He showed us that true power doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender. Prayer isn't just asking for things, it's giving up your right to lead. It's choosing divine will over personal comfort. If Jesus Himself, the Son of God, needed to pray in His most difficult hour, how much more do we? Let's look to the life of George Washington Carver. A man of science and intellect, yes, but also a man of prayer. He once said, without God to draw aside the curtain, I would be helpless. He approached his work in the laboratory not as a scholar first, but as a seeker of divine revelation. Every discovery, every innovation, he attributed not to genius, but to the gentle whispers of heaven. His story proves that prayer is not just spiritual, it's practical. It's where divine strategy is birthed. When the chosen one prays, heaven doesn't just open spiritually, it releases solutions, ideas, timing, and alignment. That's why prayer isn't a ritual. It's a compass. When you're lost in the wilderness of life, when nothing makes sense, when paths seem blurred, prayer becomes the voice that recalibrates your soul. This is the way, the Spirit whispers. Walk in it. Prayer doesn't always remove the storm, but it teaches you how to walk through it without fear. It doesn't always give instant answers, but it always gives unshakable peace. When you pray, you may not always hear God's voice clearly, but you always position yourself to be changed by His presence. Many live life in reaction. Something goes wrong, they panic. A door closes, they push harder. But the chosen ones are different. They don't react, they return. To the secret place. To the altar. To the quiet room where it's just them and God. The difference between those who burn out and those who break through is not strength, it's surrender through prayer. It's not that chosen ones are stronger. It's that they know where to run. When the world gets loud, they go low. And that is why they overcome. Prayer is the place where you let go of the illusion of control, and God steps in. It's not about saying the right words. It's about making space for the right presence. It's where fear becomes faith. Where wounds become worship. And where waiting becomes trust. You might say you believe in God, but your prayer life reveals whether you rely on Him. When you truly pray, something shifts, not just around you, but within you. Your mind clears. Your soul steadies. Your spirit aligns. So again, the question echoes, is prayer your afterthought, or your lifeline? That one question can diagnose the spiritual condition of your heart. Because if prayer is still just a tool in your emergency kit, you haven't yet tasted its fullness. But if prayer is your first breath in the morning, your guide through the day, your covering at night, then you've entered into divine rhythm. It's no longer an activity. It's your atmosphere. And don't miss this, prayer doesn't only change your internal world. It shifts your external assignment. You cannot walk in your divine calling without hearing divine instruction. And you cannot hear divine instruction without making time to listen. Every mission from God begins with a moment in prayer. Every breakthrough begins with intimacy. Every strategy begins with surrender. Prayer is not the backup plan, it is the battle plan. It's where victories are won before the fight even begins. Prayer purifies your motives. It heals your brokenness. It builds your resilience. In the secret place, you are restored. That's where you receive vision, clarity, and the peace that passes understanding. It's where God reminds you of who you are, and whose you are. It's where your weariness meets His rest. It's where your confusion meets His clarity. It's where your smallness meets His greatness. The truth is, you cannot be a chosen one and live without prayer. You cannot carry the weight of your calling if you're not constantly returning to the one who called you. When prayer becomes your posture, you move in power. When prayer becomes your foundation, no storm can knock you over. Because even when everything around you shifts, the one who meets you in the secret place never changes. And if today, your calling feels too heavy, your path feels unclear, or your soul feels tired, maybe it's time to go back. Not to the noise. Not to the performance. But to the quiet place where you first heard His whisper. Go back to prayer. Because that's where all true power begins. You've prayed. You've worked hard. You've done all the right things. And yet, the doors still feel closed. The path unclear. The blessings delayed. Maybe it's not that you're doing the wrong things, but that you're doing them from the wrong alignment. There is a difference between living a good life, and living a God-aligned life. You can strive all you want, push every door open, try to force your way through, only to find yourself exhausted, directionless, and still unfulfilled. The question is not, are you trying, but rather, are you aligned? The truth is, many of us were taught to believe that success comes from effort alone. And while hard work matters, effort without alignment is like running fast in the wrong direction. It's possible to be busy and still be lost. It's possible to be productive and still be misaligned with heaven. Divine alignment is not about trying harder, it's about surrendering deeper. It's the spiritual posture where you stop asking God to bless your plan, and instead ask Him to reveal His. There's an image that captures this perfectly, a boat paddling furiously upstream, against the current, exhausting every ounce of strength, versus a boat whose sail is lifted, letting the wind of God carry it in the direction it was always meant to go. That's what divine alignment feels like. It's not passive. It's peaceful. It's not lazy. It's obedient. And in that obedience, there is movement, there is power, and above all, there is peace. We see this in the life of Denzel Washington. Early in his career, he pursued fame and success on his own terms. But then came a moment of clarity. His mother told him, "You can't buy your way to heaven." That sentence shook him. It wasn't about guilt, it was about guidance. From that point on, Denzel began to recenter his life on God's will. He began to pray before choosing roles. He used his platform not just for entertainment, but for impact. His alignment didn't limit his success, it magnified his purpose. Because when you walk in God's plan, the blessing is not just in what you do, but in who you become while doing it. Tyler Perry's story echoes the same truth. Homeless, rejected, misunderstood, he could have given up. But in his deepest struggles, he didn't push harder. He prayed deeper. He said, "God, if this is your will, open the door. If it's not, shut it and give me peace." And that kind of surrender led to supernatural promotion. His breakthrough didn't come from networking, it came from kneeling. He didn't manipulate his way forward. He surrendered, and God elevated him. Divine alignment doesn't destroy your dreams, it purifies them and launches them into their true purpose. And here's the paradox: when you align with God, you don't always move faster, but you always move further. Why? Because peace becomes your pacesetter. You no longer strive to compete, to prove, or to chase approval. You're not bound by deadlines that heaven never gave you. You stop measuring your progress by the world's standards, and begin to trust God's process. The moment you align, frustration loses its grip, anxiety fades, and clarity takes its place. That's not magic. That's divine alignment. As the content so powerfully states, when you align yourself with God's plan, you are no longer bound by frustration or impatience. You're not rushing ahead. You're not dragging behind. You're walking hand in hand with your Creator, each step infused with purpose, even if the whole path isn't yet visible. Divine alignment feels like rest in motion. It's knowing that God goes before you, walks beside you, and holds your future in His hands. But what if you've been out of alignment and didn't even know it? What if you've been praying but still feel anxious, working but still feel stuck, trying, but never arriving? These are spiritual symptoms. They don't mean you're a failure, they mean you've been carrying what you were meant to release. Misalignment often shows up as confusion, chronic fatigue, and a deep inner unrest, even when everything looks fine on the outside. That's your soul calling out for a recalibration. That's the Holy Spirit whispering, "There's a better way." There's a moment of decision that every chosen one must face. Will you stop striving and start surrendering? Will you stop writing your own story and finally ask the author to take over? Surrender is not giving up, it's giving over. It's not passive, it's powerful. Because the moment you hand it all to God, He begins to do what only He can. That's when miracles flow. That's when alignment activates favor. You weren't chosen to chase after the same things the world chases. You weren't created to carry the same weights the world carries. You've been set apart for divine alignment. And in that alignment is your protection, your provision, and your peace. When you stop fighting for control, you begin to experience the freedom of being led. When you stop performing for approval, you start living from identity. And when you stop striving, you start soaring. Let this be the moment you release the tight grip on your plans. Let this be the season where you pause, breathe, and say, "Lord, I surrender. Not my will, but yours." Because the truth is, the doors you open with your own strength won't lead to lasting fulfillment. But the doors God opens through alignment, those are the ones no man can shut. You are a chosen one. Not to strive, but to surrender. Not to manipulate outcomes, but to trust divine timing. Not to chase the world's applause, but to walk in heaven's assignment. And here's the promise: When you live in divine alignment, your life becomes a message, your presence becomes a testimony, and your peace becomes contagious. So I ask you now, gently, but boldly. Will you stop striving, and start surrendering? Because the moment you do, heaven moves. You've listened. You've felt it in your spirit. Something in this message didn't just pass through your ears, it reached your heart. That's not an accident. That's alignment. You didn't arrive here by chance. This moment, this message, and this confirmation were meant for you. Because you, chosen one, have been set apart. And now, the invitation is simple, yet sacred. What will you do with what you've just received? This is not a typical end to a video. This is a spiritual threshold. It's a moment between revelation and response. And I want to speak to you, not just as a viewer, but as a fellow traveler on this divine journey. If you've been watching with an open heart, you know by now, this wasn't entertainment. This was a reminder. A confirmation. A call. So before you go, take a deep breath. This is not pressure, it's permission. Permission to step fully into your calling. Permission to acknowledge what's stirring in your soul. You are not being left behind. You are being launched. If this message spoke to you, if something inside said, "This is me," then I invite you to leave a comment below, not just as a reply, but as a declaration. You can share a prayer. You can share your story. You can share a moment of surrender, a step of faith, or a word of gratitude. This comment section isn't just a space for feedback, it's a sacred ground. A digital altar where chosen ones gather, pray for one another, and speak life over each other's journeys. Leave your thoughts and prayers. I read them. I pray with you. And you never know, someone scrolling by might read your words and find the hope they were praying for. You never know how your story might light someone else's darkness. And if this video touched you, like it not for the algorithm, but because it signals to others that this is holy ground. Subscribe not just to follow a channel, but to stay connected to a growing community of believers who are awakening to their true identity in Christ. Share it with someone who may need this reminder today, not for clicks, but for breakthrough. Because sometimes, your simple act of sharing is the answer to someone else's silent prayer. Remember this, you are chosen, and that means something. It means the journey you've walked, every battle, every breakdown, was not for nothing. It has prepared you for this very moment. And while the world may not see it yet, heaven already knows your name. You may not feel qualified. You may still have questions. But you don't have to have it all figured out to move forward in faith. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is simply saying, "Yes, Lord. I'm ready." Even if your voice shakes. Even if your hands tremble. Faith begins when striving ends and surrender begins. So here is your gentle invitation, spoken with love and reverence. If this message confirmed something in your spirit, don't walk away in silence. Respond. Reflect. Reclaim your identity. You've been called. You've been equipped. You are being sent. And as this video draws to a close, I'll leave you with these final words, not as a farewell, but as a blessing. You are chosen. And the best is yet to come. Let that truth linger in your heart. Let it anchor your soul. You didn't just finish a video. You opened a new chapter. Now step into it, with peace, with purpose, and with the full knowledge that heaven walks with you.